Growing up, you might have heard of somebody named Richard Dawkins. He is an atheist who makes tremendously bad arguments against God, religion, and particularly bad arguments against Islam. Now, I thought a few years ago he would have retired from being an incredulous human being and making such horrible arguments. But lo and behold, he's still posting these horrible arguments on Twitter and asking people to sub to his Patreon so he can continue to try and disprove God, even though he has failed to do it for many years now. So I thought it'd be fun to just jump on here and refute some of these really sad arguments in a matter of minutes, if not less than a minute. I'm going to rant a little bit because honestly, I find this kind of fun. I genuinely hope Richard Dawkins stops with this pathetic level of atheism and retires to either agnosticism, which is at least a little bit more fair, or stops trying to disprove God and just accepts that God exists. So let's see what Richard Dawkins has to say about God and the universe.
It does seem to be the case that physicists have measured half a dozen or so fundamental constants, things like the gravitational constant, which are very critical in the sense that if they were ever so slightly different, the universe as we know it wouldn't come into being. There wouldn't be galaxies, there wouldn't be stars, there wouldn't be chemistry, there wouldn't be planets, there wouldn't be us, wouldn't be evolution. And so it can be argued that these constants are very finely tuned, and if they weren't finely tuned, we wouldn't be here. Well, we are here, and so evidently they were finely tuned. The temptation to think that they were tuned by some intelligent being is hopeless, because that doesn't explain anything, it just pushes the problem back to how the intelligence itself got tuned.
So you could see he accepts that the universe is finely tuned, and he even seemingly understands that it's natural for human beings to intuitively believe that when there is a design, there is a designer. But instead of dealing with this or accepting it, he just says it's hopeless. Why? Because of this one little thing. You push it back by one step because who finely tuned the intelligent designer? This is a pathetically sad argument. Firstly, let's just use the word God, because I'm going to talk about God. I don't think there can be an intelligent designer of the universe if it is not God. And if it does require tuning itself, then God would have tuned the thing that tuned the universe. But aside from all that mumbo jumbo, let me just explain why it makes no sense. For something to be tuned, it requires that it could have parts that can be tuned. It could have different constants that can be tuned. The universe has different constants or parts that are tuned. Like a guitar has different parts that can be tuned. God, since he is one, not made up of any parts, never began to exist, never came from anything, and was not constructed. He was not finely tuned and never needed to be finely tuned because God is not something that you can or cannot tune. For something to be tuned, it must be fathomable that that thing could exist in a different way. But it's not even fathomable for us to understand God in a different way because then he just would not be God anymore. Because God is defined by his characteristics. The universe, on the other hand, is defined as space-time, matter, whatever, anything that physically exists, whatever you want to define it as. And this, fathomably, can exist in a different way. You could understand the universe existing in a more chaotic fashion, or the universe like right after the Big Bang when it just like exploded in a more chaotic state. You could fathom it in that way. Now, if you believe, and I don't know what you believe, Richard Dawkins, if you believe that the universe had a Big Bang, then you believe that it was up to random and for us maybe undeterminable factors that caused 12 constants to be perfectly tuned upon one go. Listen, you're not a dumb person. You're a smart guy. You know, even if you don't know what the specific odds are, you know it's insanely unlikely and basically impossible for this to happen once, twice, 3 times, 10 times, 100 times, and you get it. You would have to have basically an infinite amount of times of doing the Big Bang to get the universe in this way. Now you, as an atheist, might say, yeah, we did. There were an infinite amount of times. But that doesn't make sense either. Because if the Big Bang happened an infinite amount of times, no beginning, no end, then the universe would never exist. Because the Big Bang would have to happen an infinite amount of times before the Big Bang that made our universe in the way that it is today. Similarly, if I say an infinite amount of words before I let you speak, you would never talk. So if the universe had to go through an infinite amount of Big Bangs in trial and error to get to this point, then we would never get to this point. This is the idea of infinite regression. I'm sure you've heard it before. So, which leads me to my next point. The universe, as it is right now, had a conception, a beginning, a Big Bang that tuned it, before which it was not tuned in this manner. God did not have any conception, did not have any beginning, and therefore was never tuned nor ever needed to be tuned. He always just is. Now, that is the basic idea of God, that he was never begotten, he never began to exist, was not created, was not born from anything, and always was and always will be. So again, very clearly a poor and sad, pathetic argument from Richard Dawkins. Now, there's one more thing I want to discuss because I actually think it's a beautiful argument against atheism. He makes such a tremendous argument that if you flip it on itself, destroys the idea that atheists can be trusted.